Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to speak to you about unrelated business income and how it can be a part of a successful financial strategy for your organization. I'm going to go over what unrelated business income is, the IRS tax rules for it, and how it can be used as a valuable source of funding for your organization. Then I will finish up with some recommendations for leadership and management. But first, a little bit about me. My name is Sarah Shirado, and I'm a current master's student in the Nonprofit Leadership and Management program at Arizona State University. I also have about 5 years of experience in the nonprofit and social enterprise space with the Los Alamos Arts Council and Fuller Lodge Art Center and the Center for Relational Learning in Santa Fe, New Mexico. As I'm sure you're all aware, there's a sector-wide shortage of funds for nonprofit organizations. The number of individuals giving to charity has consistently declined since a brief surge during the COVID-19 pandemic, and recent political actions threaten the long-term reliability of government funding. Sector leaders in recent years report record levels of operating deficits, inability to pay staff a living wage, and an overall increase in financial stressors. Such stressors are linked with a measurable decrease in program outcomes. To add to all of this, we are currently experiencing a sector-wide increase in demand for services. In order to help remediate financial issues, your organization has the opportunity to pursue unrestricted funds in the form of unrelated business income, or UBI. So, what is UBI? The IRS defines UBI as the income from a trade or business regularly conducted by an exempt organization and not substantially related to the performance by the organization of its exempt purpose or function. Nonprofit organizations, in our context 501c3 organizations specifically, must pay unrelated business income tax, or UBIT, on any UBI raised. This is done with a supplemental tax form, the Form 990T. It is important to do this correctly because failure to correctly report and pay UBIT can result in an organization's nonprofit status being revoked. What is also interesting here is that the IRS has no standard definition of what counts as substantially or unsubstantially related to an organization's tax-exempt purpose or mission. As a result, interpretations vary for what counts as UBI in different situations. That being said, I suggest erring on the side of caution given the possible ramifications of doing it wrong should you find yourselves being audited by the IRS. Similarly, the IRS requires that your unrelated business activities not become so great that they constitute the primary purpose of the organization. Again, though, there is no standard for what counts as primary, whether that's measured financially or otherwise. Some common examples of UBI ventures include rental of the organization's facilities for events, income from debt finance property, gift shops, endorsements, and restaurants, cafes, or sale of concessions. There are also some notable exceptions to having to pay UBIT. These exceptions include selling exclusively donated goods, like a thrift store, or if the labor for the business activity is exclusively provided by volunteers. Your business activity may not qualify as UBIT as well if it is not regularly carried out, such as sale of property or annual or seasonal fundraising events. Other exclusions include income from qualified corporate sponsorships, royalties, or some qualified convention or trade show income, and interest, dividends, and annuities from investments. Further information about IRS requirements can be found in the IRS publication on UBI and UBIT, which you can find a link to in the references section of the written report. There is some scholarly literature and empirical research that has been published that is relevant to our discussion today. Starting off with nonprofit commercialization. Commercialization in nonprofits is defined as the process organizations go through when they decide to turn to earned income as a primary funding source. This includes fee-for-service program income as well as UBI. Recent decades have seen an increase in commercialization in the sector, partly as a result of increased competition for declining government funds. Studies have reinforced this assertion, showing that organizations mainly commercialize because of a lack of funds, although they have been found to do it for other reasons as well, including emulating other successful organizations or as part of an effort to improve perceived legitimacy. If other organizations are doing it and it's working for them, we can do it too, right? So, what can we learn from this research? Research into nonprofit commercialization has actually shown that organizations that commercialize are more efficient, more effective, and more stable over time. That's because, in comparison to the different types of donative income, commercial or earned income has been shown to be the most stable, give organizations the greatest autonomy, increase program outcomes, and provide the most resilience in times of economic downturn. Commercializing or increasing earned revenue can also help organizations to diversify their income portfolio. Funding diversification in nonprofits has been linked to indicators of increased financial health and reduced vulnerability, including higher operating margins, larger net assets, and reduced likelihood of program cuts, loss in net assets, or organizational closure. Revenue diversification has also been shown to be associated with greater organizational and program outputs than concentrating on one income type alone. Another area of research that is relevant to our discussion today is related to organizational autonomy and resource dependence theory. Resource dependence theory, or RDT, in short, is concerned with the effects of different funding sources on an organization's autonomy. Relying too heavily on certain sources of income can affect mission-related and strategic decisions. Revenue diversification, as mentioned earlier, can help to reduce any single funding source's power over your organization, and in turn reduce the likelihood of being forced to make mission-related decisions solely in order to keep enough funding. That being said, all funding sources have positive and negative aspects associated with pursuing them. Individual donations and foundation funds, for example, have been shown to be the most volatile and result in the most mission drift, which I will discuss more later. This type of donative income is primarily in the form of restricted funds, which can only be used for certain purposes, usually program-related. Over-reliance on this type of income can often result in what is called the nonprofit starvation cycle. You likely know what this is, even if you don't recognize the term. It's what happens when donors and funders overemphasize efficiency to the detriment of effectiveness and long-term sustainability. Evidence shows that efficiency, or the ratio of program spending to overhead, is not directly correlated to program outcomes or effectiveness. However, donors and funders have been shown to support organizations with higher efficiency and lower levels of overhead. This can result in organizations investing less in capacity, human capital, necessary administrative costs, and more that do directly influence organizational and program effectiveness. Government funding comes with some similar issues. For example, some organizations are now finding their funding threatened by recent political actions. Like individual and foundation donations, government funding usually comes in the form of restricted funds that can only be spent on program costs. Government grants often also carry involved applications and reporting requirements which require significant administrative investment. Beyond the benefits I already mentioned, earned income, such as UBI, on the other hand, has been shown to be the most stable over time and can be a really good source of unrestricted funds that can be invested back into the organization through capacity building, paying employees more, investing in fundraising, marketing, administrative activities, anything your organization needs to be more effective. A concept that I mentioned a moment ago that is related to resource dependence theory is mission drift. Mission drift, sometimes called mission creep or goal displacement, refers to the incrementally escalating process of an organization making strategic decisions that are in opposition to its mission. Mission drift is an unintentional and damaging process that weakens mission impact and is not the same as intentionally and strategically pivoting to accommodate changing needs in the community. Resource dependence theory, as we just discussed, explains why mission drift can happen as a result of funding source. Despite the absence of empirical evidence to back up their claims, many scholars have warned that earned income, and UBI in particular, could result in greater mission drift as a result of having to choose between maximizing revenue or maximizing impact. Fortunately for us, though, evidence shows that commercial activity does not result in increased prevalence of mission drift. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, organizations that rely primarily on donated income experience the most mission drift. Earned income and UBI result in higher levels of unrestricted funds, which allows organizations to invest more into their missions. But although mission drift isn't more of a problem for commercial organizations than it is for other types, it is still important to guard against it. This can be done through governance measures and evaluations. Research in this area has shown that mission drift can be avoided through governance measures that ensure participative decision-making. Organizations must create decision-making processes that value input from underrepresented stakeholder groups and those who are at the bottom of the organizational hierarchy, such as program beneficiaries, volunteers, and low-level employees. These decision-making processes can help to ensure that strategic decisions made at the organizational level are based on what is best for the mission, not what will make the most money. Similarly, regular evaluations should be conducted, ideally by an unbiased third party. The results of these evaluations should be used to inform strategic decisions in order to ensure that programs and activities are undertaken because they are the most effective, not because they can result in the most funding. Considering whether or not you should start an unrelated business venture, there are some things to keep in mind. To start off with, some types of organizations may be more or less suited to starting a particular type of venture or any commercial venture overall. For example, membership organizations have been shown to be more successful in raising UBI, while organizations with political advocacy missions are usually less successful. Similarly, some UBI ventures may require more financial or administrative investment. For example, live performances require high levels of overhead. Something else to consider is the time and effort that must be invested into paying and reporting UBIT. And finally, stakeholder and public perceptions can really affect what kinds of unrelated business activities you may pursue, or if you want to pursue any at all. You could be doing everything right as an organization, but if the public or certain stakeholder groups don't approve of pursuing UBI for whatever reason, that's worth taking into account. Next, I'll quickly talk about a couple of organizations whose directors I interviewed to get a couple of real-world examples of commercialization and UBI. First is the Los Alamos Historical Society, a small nonprofit in Los Alamos, New Mexico that owns the local history museum, keeps archives for the town, and also owns a few other historical sites around town. Since taking the directorship, Todd Nichols has pursued commercialization through multiple means, including expanding the gift shop. Though the Historical Society relies on local government contracts to a significant degree, commercialization has allowed them to reinvest in their organization, building capacity, doubling staff compensation, and allowing them to invest in significant fundraising campaigns to fund restoration of historical sites that will be open to the public in the coming years. I also spoke with Christoph Heinrich, the director of the Denver Art Museum. Although the Denver Art Museum is much larger than the Los Alamos Historical Society, with a budget in the tens of millions, they share some similar approaches to funding. For example, the Denver Art Museum does not pursue federal funding, not just because of our current political situation, but because federal grants generally do not provide enough funding for the significant investment required for application and reporting to make sense. Todd Nichols at the Los Alamos Historical Society also mentioned not pursuing government grants for similar reasons. Similarly, both of the directors mentioned local government funding as a significant funding source, but because these are fixed amounts, earned income is what they can work to increase over time. Mr. Heinrich mentioned that the amount of visitors coming to the museum still hasn't reached pre-pandemic levels, but they augment ticket sales by operating multiple different UBI ventures. They have 2 restaurants on their grounds and a large gift shop. They also rent multiple spaces for events and offer catering services for those events. And for a moment, I would like to focus on the restaurants. One of the restaurants is a cafe/coffee shop, while the other, pictured in the top right here, is a more formal sit-down restaurant. These restaurants are a good example of an organization leveraging its features and assets into a successful unrelated business venture. What I mean by that is that the Denver Art Museum recognizes that visitors tend to spend hours at a time on their campus, so they're taking advantage of that aspect of their organization by offering a place to sit down and get something to eat and drink. This not only improves the visitor experience, but raises unrestricted funds for the organization in the process. So, now that we know what UBI is, we understand the benefits of commercialization and UBI, and we have looked at a couple of examples. I have 6 recommendations for how you can put this all into practice in your own organization. First is create an unrelated business venture. We've learned that earned income is overall most stable, the best source of unrestricted funding, and a good way to raise extra funds outside of your core activities, so go for it. UBI can be a good part of a successful funding strategy. As I mentioned earlier, some common examples of UBI include renting space for events, having a restaurant or cafe or selling concessions, gift shops, leasing land to a communications company for a cell tower, or endorsements. Remember, it's anything that is A, not part of your mission, B, regularly carried out, and C, commercial, meaning the main purpose of it is to make money for the organization. Number 2 is leverage your core activities. Take a page out of the Denver Art Museum's book and use what you already have going for you as an organization to your advantage. That could be selling something to your members if you're a membership organization, renting your space for events if you own a historical building, or starting a gift shop or cafe if you have visitors and you're open to the public. 3. Look to others. Do research on what other organizations in your area and in your subsector are doing when it comes to UBI, and consider what could work for you as well. You could also consider partnering with other businesses or organizations. The Denver Art Museum is a good example of this as well. The restaurants and catering services that they offer that I mentioned earlier are run by a separate contracted company. Contracting with other businesses to run your UBI venture, though it costs money, can be a good option if you don't have the staff or administrative time to invest into running regular business activities. That way, you could possibly improve your beneficiaries' experience, raise some unrestricted funding, and not lose a lot of staff time. Number 4 is build in accountability. As we learned earlier, 2 proven ways to defend against mission drift are participative governance and regular evaluations. Even though mission drift isn't more of a problem for commercial organizations or those who pursue UBI, it is still a concern, and it's good to take steps to ensure that the mission-related decisions you make are strategic and based on the input of those who are most invested in the mission's success, and also based in evidence regarding what's most effective and not what makes the most money. Next, do what makes sense for your organization. As I mentioned earlier, some types of organizations are just more suited to certain types of UBI activities. So some kinds of business ventures might not make sense for your organization, even if they make sense for someone else. It's important to consider stakeholder opinions, including the public. Above all, we are mission-based organizations, so we only want to do what is helpful and not harmful. So it's important to take into account all of the possible implications a specific UBI venture could have. Take a domestic violence shelter as an example. If this shelter wants to start pursuing UBI, they need to think about what message they're sending with what they choose to do. So they probably wouldn't want to run or contract with a bar or brewery for UBI, right? Because that might have a moral or ethical implication that they wouldn't want. Similarly, they might not want to lease land for a cell tower because that could pose a security risk for their beneficiaries. So we have to take into account not only the ethical implications of whatever business activities you decide to pursue, but also the security and safety of the organization, client information, etc. So that's just some things to keep in mind when you're deciding what kind of business activities to pursue. And finally, stay compliant. As I mentioned in the beginning, not correctly paying and reporting UBI can result in revocation of a nonprofit status. So it's very important to make sure that all of your accounting and tax reporting is accurate. If you have any doubts, try working with professionals who are experienced in this area. In conclusion, unrelated business income, or UBI, can be a valuable, stable source of unrestricted funding for nonprofits. There's a wide range of activities that could be undertaken for UBI, but if you follow these 6 recommendations, you can find one that works for your organization that will increase your capacity, your sustainability, and your effectiveness at meeting your mission. So thank you all for your time today, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.